What's good, my people? Welcome to SillyMMA, and today we'll be looking why UFC 315 sucks and why it is all the UFC's fault. This upcoming pay-per-view this weekend is hot garbage. It is rubbish, and the UFC have single-handedly destroyed this. And this is a theme we're seeing across some pay-per-views in recent history. So we're going to go over the points now on why the UFC have done this to their own pay-per-view. And the first thing is putting pay-per-view worthy fights on fight night cards. I mean, this just waste fights when you could add much needed value to a pay-per-view like UFC 315, even just an Urban Elliott versus Brahimaj on an Apex card prelims. Put that on the prelims of a pay-per-view. Urban Elliott's already been on the prelim of pay-per-view 3 times. He's got a knockout. He's a big prospect in welterweight. Put him on. Gilbert Burns versus Morales. They were actually on the main card of UFC 15, and they went through the effort to move it to a fight night main event. I don't want that as a fight night main event for an Apex card that nobody cares for. Put it on the pay-per-view, which improves it so much more. Ludwig Klein versus Mateus Gamrot is not even the main event of an Apex card. For God's sake, a co-main event that could add so much value to a card like UFC 15 as a main card opener. Why do they keep doing that? I don't know. Even a Jamal Hill versus Khalil Roundtree. Why is that headlining a card in Azerbaijan when Fiziev is the co-main event? Why is 2 American dudes headlining there when you have Fiziev versus Bahamondes as the co-main event? Put these on the UFC 315 card. Put them as the main event. It doesn't make any sense. The UFC are single-handedly destroying pay-per-views just to make some fight nights slightly better, and that is why the market for pay-per-views is going down so much. It doesn't make sense. The UFC are screwing themselves over here. Also, why are female fighters dominating the main card? One woman MMA title fight is enough. A number 1 contender fight on the main card is absolutely mocking it. Put it on the prelims. Why is 2 of the last 4 fights on this main card woman MMA? It doesn't make sense. Female fights non-title do not belong on main cards. Put them on the prelims like Yan Xiaonan and Vinda Janaruba was. Grasso vs Silva should be on the featured prelim over Charles Radke or Mike Mallet. Move them down, bringing space for a big fight like a Jamal Hill or Khalil Roundtree or Burns vs Morales. That should have been on this card. Also, they are lackluster. High-level fights in women MMA are rubbish. When was the last time we seen a finish? Zhang Weili is the only good female champion or the only good female fighter right at the top of the sport. They're always boring. We've seen it with Lemos and Lucinda on the main card of UFC 311, I think it was. It's just rubbish. It's just boring. It's a waste of time. I don't know why the UFC keep doing it and demolishing main cards which people are paying $80 for. Also, rubbish matchmaking. Why is the UFC matchmaking the worst fights? Why is Jose Aldo still fighting prospects right at the ripe age of 38 or however old he is? We don't even know how old he is. Why is he fighting Amos Zahabi? He's come back to the UFC. He's fought 2 prospects, Mario Bautista and Jonathan Martinez. Why is he fighting these guys? He should be fighting the Cejudos, the Figueiredos, even like a Rob Font. He's a legend. Be honoured that he's here fighting for you, fighting so well like he's in his prime. Well, not to that extent. But why give him Amy Zahabi, Ariel Hawani, the Canadian prospect in Canada? Put some respect on this man. It doesn't make sense. Give him a big fight. He just got robbed against Bautista. He won against Martinez. Just disrespecting a legend. And then the next thing, why is Benoit Saint Denis, who's a man of fight, Joel Alvarez pulled up, and Gamrot said he asked for the fight. Mateusz Rebecki asked for the fight. And they're bringing in Kyle Propolek. The man went 0-2 in the UFC. He's been barely active, fighting in some random promotions, and they're bringing him back off the regional scene with a win-loss record and putting him on the main card of a pay-per-view. It doesn't make sense. Benoit Saint Denis, why is he fighting this bum? It's an easy win. It doesn't make sense. He's not fought in ages. It's a welterweight, and they're bringing him back down to lightweight. It doesn't make any sense. And also, Gillian Robertson fought on the UFC EOA card. She is one of the biggest Canadian prospects, the biggest Canadian woman MMA fighter. Why is she fighting in Des Moines? It doesn't make any sense. Put her on here, even her on the main card against Marina Rodriguez. That would have made more sense than a Grasso versus Silva, even though they both should be on the prelims. It doesn't make any sense. The UFC are screwing themselves over with rubbish matchmaking, and it's just making these pay-per-views even more meaningless and worse. Final thing, 0 promotion. I mean, this is not explicit to UFC 315. The UFC have always been rubbish at promoting it because they have built a fan base and they're not looking to expand past that fan base. I mean, Dana White, the bloody president of the UFC, he promotes his rivals boxing and bloody slap fighting nowadays more than the UFC itself. There's no promotion, there's no hype for any of these pay-per-views, and especially when a card like UFC 315 is on the lower end. Some promotions, maybe a fight on the prelims that is good that we don't know about. Maybe if you promote that, we could get a bit more hyped up. There's no effort. The UFC Instagram page just posts some pictures of them celebrating, some highlights, and me and the John might ask them some random questions, like if they like apple juice or orange juice, or if they wash their feet in the shower. It doesn't make sense. Dana White is helping his enemies, and he puts his face nowhere near UFC promotions. He doesn't even do much press conferences nowadays. I mean, to be fair, that's the only thing he does, but even John Anik does most of them. It's just, it's so embarrassing for the UFC, because this is a big product, and we see when they promote it, like what they did in COVID, they grow up so much. I mean, that was mainly because there was nothing else on, but when they make an effort, they can expand their fan base, and they're just doing some shit, cringy interviews, no real promotion, and for a weaker pay-per-view, it just derails the hype. And now I'm going to get on to how I think the UFC can fix this. The first thing is start properly promoting pay-per-views. Stop doing all this rubbish Instagram posts. Get actual promotion where you can't only deal with a press conference. Get some face-to-faces. We used to do whole tours. You don't need that every pay-per-view. But when it's warranted, and when a UFC pay-per-view is on the lower end, get a bit more promotion in. It makes sense. It builds up hype. It's better for the fighters. It's better for the promotion. It gets the fans more gas for an event. Why would you do it? The UFC have turned lazy with this element of the sport, which got them to the very top and to be the biggest MMA promotion. The next thing, stop throwing most good fights on fight nights, especially irrelevant Apex ones. I like an occasional UFC Saudi Arabia, Adesanya Imavov, an occasional UFC Atlanta with Usman Buckley. But why is Gilbert Burns headlining against Michael Morales? Why do they keep doing these useless Apex cards? I guess they have to fill out a contract with a certain amount of events, but them extra 15 events are killing pay-per-views overall, and that's a really bad thing for the UFC. Make them on pay-per-views, put them on pay-per-views. One fight can add so much worth to a pay-per-view. Imagine Gilbert Burns versus Morales, or Jamal Hill versus Khalil Roundtree was on the main card. We would look at it in a completely different eye, because an extra 15 minutes or less of entertainment. And that's how easy it is for the UFC, and that's why it's so annoying that they're not doing it. It's rubbish, and they're putting them on the Apex cards. No one cares about them. Gets wasted. Start seriously thinking about matchmaking and not making meaningless fights that don't make sense. Why is Jose Aldo fighting a prospect? Why is Benoit Saint Denis fighting some bum? Doesn't make any sense. Why is Jamal Hill and Khalil Roundtree a good fight being booked? Why is it being booked in bloody Azerbaijan? Make fights that make sense, make them logical. And only women MMA title fights should be on pay-per-view main cards. I'm fed up of this number one contender bullshit. Alexia Grasso versus Natalia Silva have no place on an event that people are paying money for. They belong on the prelims. Same with Lemos and Luciendo at 311. Yan Jian and Bunda Janarova, that's what you should be doing with every pay-per-view. Even title fights are suffering to get through at most times, unless there's a Zhang Weili fight. Put them on the prelims, no one's asked, and that is it. Thank you very much for watching.